Cathay Pacific and Cathay Dragon not to apply for government subsidies under the Employment Support Scheme. 3 cases of locally acquired COVID-19 infections. And Donald Trump denies lying about the risks of the new coronavirus.
Good evening and welcome. Cathay Pacific and Cathay Dragon have decided not to apply for government subsidies under the second tranche of the Employment Support Scheme.
Sources say the Cathay management may submit a restructuring plan, including the option of staff layoffs, to the board of directors as soon as next month. Sharon Tang has more.
Like many other airlines, Cathay Pacific and Cathay Dragon have been hard hit by the pandemic, with many of their planes grounded amid a drastic drop in air travel demand. Just last month, Cathay Pacific posted a $9.9 billion loss in the first half of 2020. Earlier, the city's flagship carrier and its subsidiaries received $700 million in government subsidies under the Employment Support Scheme. That came with the condition that there wouldn't be any headcount reduction between June and August. Application for the second tranche of the Employment Support Scheme is about to end. Today, the company announced that Cathay Pacific and Cathay Dragon, with some 20,000 employees, will not submit applications for subsidies after careful consideration. In a statement, Cathay noted it's inevitable the airline company will need to right-size the carriers to cope with the reduced air travel demand. It's believed the management will propose a restructuring plan, which includes the option of layoffs, to the board of directors next month at the earliest. An expert offered his view on the airline's decision.
Cathay would retain more flexibility in the future restructuring of the entire operation. In this respect, I think not only pilots would be affected, but the other crew members, attendants, and also other supporting staffs would also be affected by the possible layoff.
Still, some of the Cathay Group's subsidiaries, such as Hong Kong Express and Cathay Pacific Catering Services, will be seeking government help through the subsidy scheme. In June, Cathay Pacific unveiled a $39 billion recapitalization plan that included a $27 billion bailout from the government. The cash injection was said to be enough to keep Cathay running for 1 year. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
The city today saw 3 new local cases of COVID-19.
That's in addition to 9 more imported cases from the Philippines, Nepal, the UK, and Bulgaria. And more than 10 people tested preliminary positive. Dong Yeo-ne has more.
2 new local cases with unknown sources of infection were picked up by the mass testing scheme. One of the patients is a housewife living in Po Lam. She sometimes goes to the food market in Metro City. The other is a female employee of Victoria Harbour Restaurant, located at Metro Park Hotel in Mong Kok. She lives in a building on Tung Choi Street in Mong Kok and would go to a nearby market. That's the latest COVID-19 infection linked to the hotel, where multiple guests came down with the virus last week. But authorities say there's no direct link between this case and the previous outbreak. 5 of the imported cases involve a group of Filipino domestic helpers arriving on the same flight. 1 more initially tested positive for the virus. Health authorities say they might have been infected before boarding the flight.
They are arranged by the same agency, and I think most of them live together in a hostel provided by the agency in Manila. So there may have been some, if there is any silent transmission in the hostel.
The cases raised doubt over the current surveillance system, which allows foreign domestic helpers with health reports certified by their country's agencies to leave for the city.
Their laboratory report are certified by their respective health authority. That's why we can't check their test because we're so far away. So we can only rely on the report from the health authority.
Starting tomorrow, more than half of the testing centers under the Universal Community Testing Program will be closed down. 57 centers will remain in operation until next Monday. As of this morning, over 1.5 million people had samples collected from them under the testing scheme. Local health authorities think there is no need to further extend the program. They urge the public to take advantage of other local testing opportunities if they need to get tested. Deng Yaonie, TVB News.
Well, a further relaxation of social distancing measures today. Public gatherings of up to 4 people are now allowed. The same for the number of people per table at eateries. And more public outdoor sports venues have reopened to the public. Outdoor skate parks, tennis courts, badminton courts, and fitness facilities are back in operation, but not basketball courts and football pitches. Some indoor sports facilities will also reopen next Thursday. Restaurants can now seat up to 4 people per table. The new limit will remain in force for a week. Still, eateries can only run at half capacity. Meanwhile, game centers, mahjong parlors, and places of amusement can reopen for business. But bars, karaoke lounges, nightclubs, bathhouses, swimming pools, and beaches remain closed.
Overseas, U.S. President Donald Trump tried to refocus attention on his Democratic rival at a rally in the battleground state of Michigan yesterday.
Trump is reeling from another crisis of his own making over revelations that he purposefully played down the danger of the coronavirus early this year. As Air Force One arrived in Michigan, the virus controversy wasn't far behind. Ahead of his latest political rally, Donald Trump faced new pushback from top state officials who warned such large-scale events will make recovery harder. But in front of a crowd of thousands of maskless supporters, Trump picked up where he left off.
Joe Biden surrendered your jobs to China, and now he wants to surrender our country to the violent left-wing mob. If Biden wins, China wins. If Biden wins, the mob wins.
Earlier, Trump continued to grapple with fallout from a new book. In a series of interviews with Washington Post journalist Bob Woodward, Trump spoke frankly about the dangers posed by the coronavirus, even as he downplayed them publicly and admitted he had tried to mislead the public. But he denied lying and deflected responsibility to a familiar target.
This is China's fault. This is nobody's fault but China. China should not have allowed it to happen. I put the ban on China. So obviously, outwardly, I said it's a very serious problem. And it's always a serious problem. That doesn't mean I'm going to jump up and down in the air and start saying people are going to die.
Critics say Trump's comments to Woodward reveal contempt for Americans.
He hid the facts and refused to take the threat seriously, leaving the entire country exposed and unprepared. He didn't want to cause a panic. Why? Because of the stock market?
Meanwhile, Trump's campaign is keen to reset the latest news cycle.
They're comfortable fighting on anything else except for the pandemic. As public opinion polls show, the Americans don't think the president has done a very good job.
While Trump resumes an aggressive campaign schedule, some states are pushing back. Nevada scuttled Trump's plans for rallies there, saying they would violate bans of gatherings of more than 50 people.
At least 7 people have died as fires rage across the western U.S.
Our city investigators are opening an investigation into the deadly wildfire in Oregon that destroyed hundreds of homes. Leslie Tang has more.
The sky over San Francisco glowed orange due to dozens of wildfires raging across U.S. West Coast states. In the past 48 hours, at least 3 people died from a lightning-sparked fire in Northern California. About 64,000 people in California are under evacuation orders. In Oregon, the fires have left hundreds of homes burned to a crisp. 3 fatalities have been reported so far. Authorities are expecting more deaths.
Everything was gone. We tried to take as much as we could, but we didn't think it would get this devastating.
Arson investigators are now probing suspicious origins of the deadly Alameda fire in Oregon that destroyed nearby communities. Around 500,000 Oregon residents have been ordered to evacuate.
We are now approaching over 900,000 acres burned across the state. To put that number into perspective, in the last 10 years, we see an average of 500,000 acres burn in an entire year. We've seen that nearly double in the past 3 days. We have never seen this amount of uncontained fire across our state. If you are advised to evacuate, please do so immediately. You may not get a second chance.
Thousands of people have been left homeless in the state, and a 1-year-old boy has died. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
India and China say they have agreed to de-escalate renewed tensions on their contested border. The Indian and Chinese foreign ministers met in Russia and agreed their troops should maintain proper distance in the cold desert Ladakh region. It's where the two sides had their deadliest clash in decades in June. Since last week, they have accused each other of sending soldiers into the territory and fired warning shots for the first time in 45 years. Both sides have now reached a 5-point consensus to quickly disengage and cool tensions.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Coroner's Court returns an open verdict for the death of a 15-year-old girl. Chinese University professor Dennis Lo awarded the Breakthrough Prize in Life Sciences.
Welcome back. A jury panel has unanimously concluded the inquest into the death of 15-year-old Chan Yin Lam with an open verdict.
Prior to their nearly 4 hours of deliberation, the coroner ruled out the possibility of both suicide and unlawful killing. Kana Chu tells us more.
Kicking off today's session, the coroner said it was understandable to feel saddened by Chan Yin Lam's plight, but it was essential for jury members to focus on evidence presented in court without being swayed by media reports. The coroner also noted that unless there was no reasonable doubt, jury members would not be considering 2 items, including the likelihood of homicide. According to him, there was no evidence suggesting she had enemies or had been attacked. The teenager was also not known to have engaged in activities which could have resulted in bodily harm. And while drugs or medication could have played a role in her death, speculation should not be made. Members of the jury were barred from deliberating the possibility of suicide as well. This as evidence pointing to Chan's suicidal tendencies were incompatible with events that took place from September 18th to 20th last year. Instead, the jury panel were given 2 options for the 15-year-old's cause of death: accident or undeterminable. To facilitate the deliberation, the court handed jury members a questionnaire consisting of 17 statements about the deceased. The panel was affirmative about 11 of the assertions, yet was uncertain of 5, such as whether Chan was clothed before entering the waters where her naked body was later found. They appealed to the government for further investigations. Concluding the inquest with an open verdict, members of the jury unanimously agreed that Chan died between the evening of September 19th last year and the day that followed. The location of her death remains a mystery. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Youngspiration member Sixtus Leung was given the green light to appeal to the Court of Final Appeal against his conviction and sentence for unlawful assembly 4 years ago. Leung and Yao Wai-ching, both belonging to Youngspiration, were ousted from LegCo for improper oath-taking. The pair were convicted and sentenced to 4 weeks in jail in 2018 in connection with forcing their way into a LegCo meeting to try to retake their oaths. While Yao has already completed her prison term, Leung was only taken into jail last week when the High Court rejected his appeal. Today, he was granted leave to take his case to the top court, but will remain in custody. Good news from the local scientific circle today. Medical professor Dennis Lo from the Chinese University of Hong Kong was awarded the Breakthrough Prize in Life Sciences. Dubbed as the Oscars of Science, the award was established to honor paradigm-shifting research in the field. His new discovery on maternal plasma DNA analyses could be used to screen nose and throat cancers that could hopefully help develop non-invasive methods to detect tumor cells. Here at home, a local athlete is not letting the coronavirus pandemic dash his Olympic dreams.
Although the rower was forced to drastically alter his training, he's remained upbeat and triumphed over his struggles. Here's Jackie Lynn.
A close race, we expect a fast race.
Smashing a world record is not what many people would expect in the thick of a pandemic.
I just follow what my coach said. He said, you can do it, Chifeng. Trust me.
Trust in his coaches and belief in himself have helped Thomas Chan etch his name in the record books. And the 22-year-old broke not one, but 2 indoor rowing records this summer. In one category, he rowed the equivalent of 1,321 meters in 4 minutes, surpassing the previous record by more than 30 meters. The distance on land is roughly from Temple Street Night Market in Mongkok to Kowloon Park in Tsim Sha Tsui. Under normal circumstances, Thomas would have to train on water right here in preparation for the Olympics. Social distancing measures forced him to train out of his elements and oftentimes alone. But these obstacles turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
Because of the gathering ban, we cannot train in a team, but indoor training lets us practice in a more stable condition.
The feat also brings him a step closer to next year's Tokyo Olympics as he strives to ratchet up his world ranking. And he believes his story serves as an inspiration for not only athletes, but for everyone who's struggling during this global pandemic.
I'm sure we can overcome the pandemic. We can make it.
Meantime, Thomas has resumed his training outdoors because of the relaxation of social distancing measures. And looking back, COVID was not a setback for him, but a setup for better things to come. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Britain says a new trade deal with Japan means 99% of the country's exports to Japan will be tariff-free. The deal, agreed in principle on today, is Britain's first after leaving the European Union earlier this year. Meanwhile, instead of closing in on a future trade deal, the EU and Britain are battling over a planned British law the EU says could sink 4 years of Brexit talks. The Internal Market Bill would diminish EU oversight of trade between mainland Britain and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland has the UK's only land border with the 27-nation bloc. After an emergency meeting in London, the European Commission's Vice President said the UK has damaged mutual trust and must withdraw the planned law or face legal action. Britain's chief Brexit minister says the proposed law overriding parts of the withdrawal agreement merely clarifies ambiguities.
There have been some who argue that this legislation is an attempt to somehow set aside the withdrawal agreement or to shirk from the implementation of the protocol. Not at all. We're absolutely serious about the implementation of the protocol. But we have to ensure that the protocol is implemented in a way that respects the fact that Northern Ireland is an integral part of the United Kingdom, part of our customs territory.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.